we believe all these homeless people are coming in from other states because we're making either. So they did a study. They found out like over 85, I think 87% of the homeless people are from the community of San Diego. So here's my take. Just to let you know, because you should know. Right, that's true.
So Frank,
wow, that's going strong.
Tell us a little bit about
we
John.
have John Franklin, the mayor of Vista. We're actually really proud of him. In our studio, we interview people we're interested in that are also entertaining and interesting. He has a good history. We're going to talk about his history, starting in Washington. Did a lot in Washington. Incredible job for Vista so far. He's been on the city council, and finally he was elected in 2023. He sat as the mayor, though, 17, 18, 19, 20. He goes way back with the city of Vista. One of the things he's known for, and we'll talk about it, is the homeless strategic plan that you created that has won. It's award-winning, so we'll see what kind of awards. And we're going to have a conversation because I think that San Diego can look at other cities out there that are making the permit process better. The investments are coming in here. They're making it easier, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for solutions. He's also a really good advocate for public safety, so we'll talk about public safety. Mark and I, ex-law enforcement, we could talk about that. And just all in all, who is he? And we're going to find out, so stay tuned.
All right, we're on.
Did you got me on my camera? Because last time you did this, that camera's on.
You're good. This one.
He couldn't switch the cameras. He was texting.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to interfere with him when he's texting.
Don't mess with millennials.
Don't mess with them when they're texting.
If you take away their cell phone, it's like ruining their lives.
But the best part is when they're texting when they're driving. And you see that all the time.
They just did a study where they asked these millennials, they said, what would it take for you to part with your smartphone permanently?
Yeah.
And the average answer was $5 million.
Yeah, wow.
Was what they wanted to
Yeah.
get.
They got off light.
Keep away with one of their phones if you want to make them crazy. Or hide their phone for a second. Right. But we're all like that. I would much rather lose my wallet today than my phone.
All right.
You know what I mean? If you had a choice, like there's a lot of good stuff in your wallet you don't want to lose. But that phone...
You know what I just did with my wallet?
You know, he was like,
so here's
I can't find my wallet without my phone.
Right.
I can't get home without my phone. You know, like...
I just took every card out of my wallet and I went to the Xerox machine and I put them all on my Xerox machine and I photocopied the front and back.
Right.
So if I lose my wallet,
yeah,
I can have that. But I lost the Xerox copy. So I don't know where it is now. Somewhere buried on my desk.
Yeah, it's weird how that wallet keeps getting thicker and thicker, and they have these like really nice wallets you see late at night, like the Slick wallet, and they can hold 5 cards. I'm like, 5 cards? Give me one that holds 20.
Well, they have those ones that cannot detect the radio frequencies.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's people that can walk past you.
Yeah, we know that.
And they can steal your.
Right.
And they do it.
I had mine stolen this month.
Oh, you did?
No way. What happened?
Somebody made a copy of my card, including the chip. And they went to Morris Cerullo Ministries. Not familiar with him. He's actually local here in San Diego. So my apologies if anybody's a fan of him. But they made a $10 contribution in person.
Oh, to test it.
And that they always do that.
Right.
And American Express said, no, sir, you were there in person. You used your chip. And I said, look, my church is up in Vista. I know I didn't give $10 at a church downtown. So.
Oh, isn't that weird?
But,
they took your chip.
Did they stop?
So
did
fraud
that all they
protection.
got was $10?
Yeah, because as soon as they did that fraudulent transaction, I spotted it and I called and.
Do you have that? Do you have that thing where they'll text you when they make any payment? I get a text if I get any payment.
Yeah, I have it set anything over $250. Text message, email. I want to know.
I got it low.
Yeah, the tech industry is a new, criminal element that you have to pay attention to because they don't steal anymore. No more burglars in your house. They just get your phone, get your identity, and then buy a house.
There's a lot of companies. Maybe you have some in Vista. They don't take cash. They just will not take cash.
No, there's a lot of people that don't take cash anymore. You go in there with cash, and they go, we don't
accept that.
What?
What is that?
Right. But then I realized when I didn't bring my wallet, you have Apple payment. You just click it twice and so you don't even need that.
I normally whip out a Bitcoin that I keep in my pocket.
Yeah, right.
I go, this is like $500,000 right here.
You haven't heard Bitcoins for a long time.
No.
Are they still? Is that still happening?
Not since that.
Oh yeah.
Not since that guy on Fantasy Island got busted.
Yeah, that guy. He did get busted.
I watched Bill Maher take it to the to the millennials last night because there's so much a fan of Bitcoin.
Right.
And he was explaining that all the power and electricity used to operate the servers that are the backbone of the blockchain are really terrible for the environment. And so,
no more
as we, we're swallowing a spider to catch a fly. And
It's so true. There's always like a counter argument with anything they post.
That's
you know,
right.
like there's 5 things here. Because you have these, I don't want to talk about millennials, but
I do.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
you got these kids that
Bring it up.
Well, for the first time, the kids are teaching the parents, right?
Right.
That's the first
My kids
generational
do.
change. Like my 4th grade math, I'm like, I can't even do it.
You're up to 4th grade?
Yeah, I'm up to.
You're
yeah,
better
barely.
than Jethro.
Right.
Jethro only made it to...
No, he made it.
No, he made it.
grade.
Yeah, he could cipher to 6th grade.
Yeah, but if you look at the way they do, like math in 4th grade right now, you will not understand
No.
it.
It's
Like,
called
how'd you get that number?
Because it's called this Common Core math. It's very confusing the way they teach math now.
Right. The whole world does it the old school way, but there's a Common Core.
Right.
They have all these. I don't know how they
Circles
do it. I
and
need to
lines.
get a tutor to teach my 4th grader how to do math. It's like embarrassing. And also with the computers, you always go to the younger generation. Hey man, how do you do this? Yeah, you just go, and their fingers start flying, and they think you're gonna. I'm not even looking. Just get me there.
4 + 4 is 8, but how did it feel about it?
Yeah.
Exactly. But is it really 8?
Right?
It could be 9.
right.
Why?
Or did the colonialists decide it was 8?
So anyway, let's start off with what I like to do is figure out.
Hey, Frank, can you take your headphones off?
Oh, are they cracking? Sorry, everybody.
It looks like you have like a catheter or something.
Well,
He does have a
I'm
catheter.
doctor. Yeah.
Frank, take your pants down and show him
Yeah.
your catheter.
I'm
I
about
didn't
it's
know catheter
pre-surgery.
wires
and
circumnavigated the neck.
the one thing I don't want to have on today
He's
is
got
a
a long,
catheter.
exactly. You got a long one that goes
Yeah,
around your
no
neck.
kidding. That's one catheter I want to deal with. Okay, there you go. Stethoscope looking things. Anyway, those are my old school headphones. For those of you who have wireless, I'm still.
I have the same
Jeez.
ones. Are
Yeah,
those Beats?
Those are Beats.
I have the
right.
same ones.
Yeah, they're so good. They're
I
reliable.
like those, yeah.
The other ones like pop out of my ear, and I
Right.
lose one, then I run it over.
You don't have enough earwax.
Yeah, exactly. That was
I have to pry mine out.
Is that how they work?
Yeah.
Just find that earwax.
Don't use Q-tips.
Yeah.
Just shove them in there.
for a legitimate
take care
seal.
of
Exactly, a drill.
So let's talk about. I guess what I want to do is start off by. I'm going to say why the heck do you want to be in politics today's age, but that's kind of.
You know what? There is no rational explanation.
There isn't, right?
I think you got to be a little crazy to want to be in public
Yeah.
service today.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about presidential politics, but one of the things that friends always ask me is, why don't we have better candidates, right? Why is the choice between this limited field, and why aren't there more people that left a job in the private sector to serve? The reality is you're going to do it for free, especially as a mayor. I do get $17.50 an hour to be the mayor.
Wow.
So
It went up.
You're successful.
I'm waiting for minimum wage so I can get
Right,
a pay increase.
right.
But
It's
it's
like cost of living adjustment.
but you couldn't live in. I have good friends that just bought in Temecula because they couldn't afford Vista.
Right.
So you certainly couldn't live in Vista
Right.
on the salary of an elected official there. So nobody's doing it to get rich. I can tell you that. It is really about an opportunity to serve people. My grandmother Inez taught me about serving other people. She never told me this, but I learned from her the secret to happiness in life is to serve other people. And occasionally I'll share that with people who are not happy for whatever
Right.
reason.
I agree.
Human
Yeah.
contion from time to time.
Volunteer.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You want to
volunteer.
be happy, serve other people.
Right.
You'll always be happy.
If you ever do suffer from depression, I've read a lot about that. The number one thing a counselor will tell you to do to get rid of depression is to volunteer.
Yeah.
And when you volunteer, it usually puts you in a place where you're helping others, and you realize, ooh, my life isn't that bad, and here I am, in my house, kind of vegging and being depressed. And then you go to a soup kitchen, you go to a homeless shelter, you do some work on the road, pick up some trash, and you realize, I got a pretty good life. It's kind of adjusting, but yeah.
Well, and the psychological benefits of volunteering and serving other people, I almost describe it as selfish because the reward is so
It's
great.
self-fulfilling, right?
It really is fulfilling.
Yeah, it is
and
true.
That's, and then on top of that, I'm the kind of person that sees something that's wrong, and I don't say they ought to.
Right.
I say I ought to because I've realized long ago the futility. Yesterday I was on the way down the highway and I saw a car that had just caught fire and there was a lot of smoke coming out of it. And my wife said, I hope the fire department's going to respond. And I thought, I'm going to, and I called 911 and I sent the fire department accurate information about where to go, because we all suffer from the idea that, well, there's so many cars, somebody else is going to do it.
Exactly.
And it's like, and when I called, they didn't say we're already on the way. They didn't know about it. So,
you're always assuming that help is on the way.
That's right.
And then there's those who actually will, heroes, park their car, go into a flaming car, pull them out. They don't even know they're on their way to work. They're not. They're not heroes. They're not firefighters. And there's just a certain amount of those percentage of people just go for it. Like they say, the firefighters, most people are running out of a burning building. Firefighters run into a burning building. But there's those who go into a burning building with no equipment. Those are rare, but I'd like to see that. And you'll see that on the news, like the new hero. It's just something that's almost inherent in you. Most people don't do it. I understand. Mark's the same way. You go like, there's a problem, fentanyl crisis, crimes going up, permit process, all these problems, and you realize, who's fixing this?
Well, you know why I like doing it? Because if I don't do it, what am I going to do? Kick the can down the road for my kids to do it?
That's right.
And I look at my daughters and I go, what kind of a city do I want them to live in? And if I don't do something as far as education or the city or law enforcement, if I just sit around,
complain,
then somebody's going to have to do it.
Right.
And I may not, and also I may not like their solution.
That's
Because
right.
their solution may not be the one that I would choose.
So you mentioned something that reminded me of probably the most critical event in my life and how I got to where I am right now, which was exactly 22 years ago today. On September
Happy anniversary, I think.
No, today,
not ago.
They know what today is.
No,
Yeah,
September
today's
11th,
September 11th. Okay,
22 years ago today.
9/11.
And I definitely want to take a minute to remember what today is about. Remember those who died 22 years ago and those who have died subsequently, and the heroes that rushed into those towers and climbed 110 stories. But I'll tell you, I was at an event yesterday, and there was a gentleman who was giving the program, and he was maybe 10 years younger than I am. I'm 44. And I'll never forget, I was in my environmental sciences laboratory class at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. It was around 8 in the morning. Maybe it was 8:30 my time, and so the events of the day had already been ongoing for a few hours.
Right.
My mother was calling me in the middle of class, and she kept calling, and so I knew it was something important, and I answered the phone. I said, "Mom, I'm in the middle of class." But the gentleman that was giving he was actually a young firefighter, was giving the program yesterday at this ceremony that I was at, and he said, "I want you to all close your eyes and think about where you were." And I thought to myself, I don't have to close my eyes.
Everybody knows where they were on that day, right?
It is so indelibly burned into my memory.
Absolutely.
I went to my car. My car was in the parking garage across the street, and I had a transistor radio in my glove box. And 22 years ago, we still had those things. And I brought it into the classroom, and I turned it on, and we were trying to get on the computers, and all the big news websites were all crashed. There were so many people trying to get on them. But I turned the radio on, and the professor was very unhappy I was interrupting class, and I was trying to explain to him, this is more important than what's going on in our class right now.
Exactly.
We all need to, but nobody knew what was going on. So, but I was just, at that moment, we didn't know if it was a terrorist or it was a horrible accident.
Right.
But obviously, it was something very consequential. I had the opportunity in April of 2001, for the first time in my life, to go to New York City. I went to the top of the Twin Towers. It was amazing, and I always felt that there was, for some reason, like God wanted me to be there and see New York as it was, and so that it would really affect me, and it did. And talk about depression. I was not depressed as an individual. I was depressed as an American, and that sense of pride that we all had in our nation, and the pulling back together, the flags on every door in our neighborhoods, really pulled me out of that. And it gave me a sense of purpose and meaning in life. And I decided after that I was going to do what I could to be influential as a citizen. And so I volunteered for the Associated Students of the University of Missouri.
How old were you?
I think I was a kid. Yeah, I was 20. I was 21 at that time.
Oh.
I was a student that needed a few years after high school to get
like
all
of us.
College,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Those
Need a
2
little
years.
break.
That's right. I
Give me
did.
a break.
I needed to work a little bit. I've worked since I was 12 or 13. And work has always been important to me. And but that really centered me. And so I represented the Associated Students at the state capitol in Jefferson City, Missouri.
Ooh.
And I had a legislator that didn't think I was fully on board with the students' ideas. And so he looked at me and he said,
Little to the right.
he said, "You don't really believe any of this, do you?" And I said, "Well, sir, I'm here to represent the students' viewpoint, not my own." And he said, "Well, why don't you come to work for me instead?" And so I did.
Who was it?
It was Rob Mayer from the Boot Heel of Missouri.
Oh.
Missouri in the southeast corner has this little appendage. It looks like the heel of a boot.
Got it.
And it was a very conservative legislator. And then I really developed a passion, a love for politics and for leadership. And so I decided to go to Washington, D.C. I didn't know anybody in Washington, D.C., not one person. And, I had a young person very recently who's here in San Diego, and they want to be involved in politics. And I tell all young people, I say, Washington, D.C. is 3,000 miles that way. Get on a plane, go. You don't need to worry about, save your money up, save enough for first and last month, print your resumes out, and go walk them door to door. Because I literally did not know anyone there, and I decided to go out and introduce myself. I've always been very intrepid, and I'll go into a strange area, I'll introduce myself. I don't need plans. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do it. It's like learning how to swim, just jumping in the deep end.
That's right. And so then I had the opportunity to be an intern in the U.S. Capitol building for Roy Blunt from Missouri, and just happened by circumstance. I finished my education at the American University in Washington, D.C.
Right.
On our school job board, there was an opportunity to work for a firm. Some of the staff there had worked for Congressman Blunt and Congressman DeLay from Texas, and they were still involved politically in their operation, and they referred me, and I got the opportunity to be an intern. And the best window I ever worked behind, if you look at a picture of the west front of the Capitol, that's the side of the Capitol that faces the Washington Monument.
Right.
There are two giant arched windows on either side of the Capitol. Most of the windows are rectangular, but there's two giant arched windows on either side of the center of the building. And one of those giant arched windows was mine. It was a small stairwell, and it was a place that was only fit for an intern behind that window.
Right. Wow.
So I had this little tiny desk that was pushed right up against that window.
But you got to look out the window.
Oh, I had the most beautiful view.
That's cool.
Of course, I had the same view as the speaker and all the other senior leaders in Congress, but an area that was only fit for an intern. But that to this day, that was
Best office space ever.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I would trade it for what I've got today in a minute.
Right.
So that was actually the stairwell of talking about the history of the Capitol. That was the stairwell to the old House chamber, which today we call Statuary Hall, which is just outside the main new House chamber that was built during the Civil War.
Nice.
I took a tour of that last year, and for anyone who hasn't been there, it's the first time I've been there, and I was born and raised in America, and for the first time, it all made sense when you walk at all these history classes that you're bored in the U.S. Constitution, but the feeling that you have when you walk into the Capitol, it's something that you can't explain. It's almost
right.
a feeling of pride, and you never had that. We're Southern California boys. We grew up on the beach, and kind of away from Washington. I'd let the politicians do their thing. But when you're actually there, whether you're in politics or not, man, it really hits you, and you hear and you see the history. We got a really good tour from Juan Vargas. Shout out to Juan, thank you, and a historian. And it was unbelievable everything that's ever happened in that Capitol. Like, there is a huge history.
Yes.
But going back to that 9/11, I remember when I was in law enforcement and rescue and fire department, and I just retired, and so I got calls that morning, and my guys who I worked with just go, turn on your phone and be on standby. That's what I heard. I'm like, what? And that's when I turned on the phone, and I was talking to them like, okay, there's a building on fire. Holy crap! What was that? Second tower just got. What is that? Is this live? Is this live right now? What was that? And there was a big explosion, okay? Yeah. So then it all came to me. Okay, now I know why they call me. Now I know why I'm on standby. Even though I retired, they got word that we are being attacked. Yeah. And we don't know what the extent is. So we don't care if you're retired. You may have to come back and do something, either take the 911 dispatch or do incident commander and all that stuff. But I remember when I saw that and how it affected me. And I do believe that even though we have everyone's pushed on extreme right, extreme left. When something like that happens, everyone comes together.
That's right.
It's almost like when you're squabbling with your family and you don't get along, and then somebody breaks in the window. Mm-hmm. Forget about us. somebody's breaking.
That's right.
All of a sudden you get
the images that really affected me were not the plane crashes, but the people jumping
Oh God, that was
because
so
they didn't
bad.
want to die in a fire
Yeah,
and holding hands
Yeah.
and going,
there's no way out.
I'm out. And I was just looking at it going.
I couldn't believe people were.
But then
jumping.
I got pissed.
Yeah, me too.
I got really pissed.
Yeah.
Almost to I was a vice principal at the time. I'm looking at these kids, not knowing that these junior high kids were going to be the future fighters in Afghanistan,
Right.
and
They
in
all joined
Iraq,
up. Mhm.
and they did join.
They did join.
A lot of them
yeah,
did.
A lot of them. 18,
And they went
send me
in.
Let's go fight.
Some high school people went in.
Right.
Everybody. They're just like, we're not going to let this happen. Now, whether or not, taking out, Saddam
Yeah.
Hussein and
Yeah,
that
whether-
whole thing
yeah,
was
after
just
that was kind of a
after that was
cluster.
like, all right, what's going on here?
I think you have the wrong enemy. Why'd you start that war? We could talk
But anyways,
about that all day.
well, let's hear. We know because it's 9/11. We're talking
Right.
about it, but let's hear. I'd like to really focus on how did you get from Washington D.C. to actually pulling the trigger and running for office.
So my work with the House Majority Whip Roy Blunt gave me an opportunity to meet somebody that had worked for Congressman Darrell Issa. And so 20 years ago, I became the legislative correspondent, or the person who answers the mail. So if you wrote the congressman a letter, it was my job to take letters that he had approved. And if you wrote about immigration, we'd probably have 25 different particular questions on immigration. And so we would find the particular point of view or the particular answer to your question and have a letter ready for that. And if we didn't have the specific answer to your specific question, my job was to draft a new letter, take it to all the congressman's staff, make sure that all that they knew about his policy perspective was represented, and then ultimately the congressman to be approved, and make sure that those folks got a timely response. So I began serving the people of Vista in 2003, and I had the opportunity to travel to Vista in 2003. And believe it or not, where I grew up in Kansas actually looks a lot like Vista. We don't have any palm trees, and the weather is much better in Vista.
Yeah.
But I instantly identified that this was a place that I would love to live one day. And it took me 6 years from there, or 7 years from there, until I ultimately achieved the dream of coming back and moving permanently to Vista. I met my wife in Vista, built a business.
That's what did
there.
it. Like,
Absolutely.
She's saying, hey,
Yeah.
I am moving to Washington.
yeah.
No,
you got to come to Vista.
That's right. That's right.
It's a motivating factor.
Her mother is here.
Nice.
I've been so fortunate. My wife is a wonderful family. My wife doesn't like how close I am with her mother. You're not supposed to get along with your mother-in-law.
She likes you better than her daughter, right?
Well, I don't want to go that far.
Okay.
I don't want to get in trouble.
Right.
But I have a great relationship with my wife's family, and I feel really fortunate and blessed to have found a family here. And life's been great. I live in the best city in America, probably in the world. We've been recognized multiple times as having the best weather.
Yeah,
We're perfectly
absolutely.
located. On the beach, you get too much cloud cover, and
Right.
it's a little too chilly.
Right.
You
Everything rusts.
That's right.
Right.
If you go inland, we're 7 miles inland. That 7 miles gives us 7 to 8 degrees of warmth.
Yeah.
greater,
Always sunny.
Greater
Always
than the
sunny.
beach. It's always sunny.
Right.
If you go inland to Escondido, and I love Escondido,
It's hot.
but you're 7 degrees warmer because
Right.
you're 7
It gets-
miles further
it
inland.
gets hot.
I think it's like 1 degree
Wow, that's
of
pretty good.
temperature
Yeah.
every
You
mile.
just
That's a good
raised the
equation.
property values by
Yeah.
7 or 8% right now
That's
in
right.
Vista.
Well,
just
Vista-
by that definition.
That's it. And I didn't do it. We've been called the climactic wonderland
Right.
of the world often, and it's one of our city mottos.
Well, explain to everybody where Vista is actually in California,
Sure.
because some people are listening that aren't even around here.
They know where most people know where San Diego is. So from San Diego, a coastal community, there's Vista.
So it took me about 40 minutes to come down the 15 this morning. I drove through Escondido. We're right between Oceanside and Escondido. We're halfway. 78 highway is about 15 miles long between Escondido and Carlsbad or Oceanside, and we're 7 miles inland between the two of them. So we neighbor San Marcos, we neighbor Oceanside, and we neighbor Carlsbad.
What's the population in Vista?
103,000.
Okay, similar to El Cajon.
Very similar to El Cajon, same population size as
Right.
San Marcos and Carlsbad.
Almost some of the same climate I would think would be in El Cajon and Vista.
Isn't and it's
Ours is
located
just a little better.
Yeah,
in
yours is a little better.
San Diego County. It's
Yeah.
which is
That's right.
3.5 million people.
Right,
so we
total.
can split up the pie there.
Right. So you got these little cities, 100,000 here, 100,000. I think.
Well, San Diego's big,
1.5 mil.
1.5. I
Right.
think San Diego is.
and
now.
about 1.5 million homeless. Just kidding.
I know we're going to talk about
That's what
that.
it feels like.
And just to tell you why I moved to Vista, I moved to Vista because it was the size of community that you could still be
Manage.
involved in.
Right.
You know, in the city of San Diego, nothing against the city of San Diego, but
It's big.
it's such a big city
Right.
that in order to plug in as a citizen and really be a part of the civic life, you know, it's difficult. You're going to be involved in a neighborhood or an industry, but I really wanted to be a member of my community.
Right.
And so to me, Vista was the perfect size place that one could really know the community and play a role in it. And
Right.
because public service is part of my background, when I moved to Vista a few years after I did, I had the opportunity to run for the water board. And of course, you know, if you want to know about politics in California,
Water
you better
boards.
start with water.
Yeah,
They-
absolutely.
Most people do not understand how much power a water board kind of sways
have
and
huge
when
power.
that resource. Can you explain a little bit what a water board does?
Sure. You know, and they're all a little different because some water boards manage wastewater in the city of Vista. The city manages wastewater. But for me, what was great about serving on the Vista Irrigation District was it engendered a love of the history of the city of Vista and the community of Vista because we're a community, we're a village that's 100 years old. The Vista Irrigation District celebrated its 100th anniversary. So the founders of the Vista Irrigation District formed a water district, an irrigation district, so that they could irrigate their crops.
Mm-hmm.
They passed a bond with 100% of the voters voting, and it passed. I just gave
100%.
100% turnout.
Wow.
You
Everyone.
don't see that anymore.
No.
And it was like 128 votes for and 4 votes against. So it was a small number of voters. But they purchased 45,000 acres of land that we still own today. The Vista Irrigation District is one of the state's largest landholders.
Wow.
So that Warner Springs Ranch is a watershed. All the water.
So the water board owns the land?
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a public resource, and it's a whole other conversation.
Do they build on that land?
No.
They
There's
drill. Don't you get the water?
No, we don't get it out of the ground. The 45,000 acres is a watershed. So all the rainwater that falls on that land
Right.
all runs into Lake Henshaw. We built a dam to create Lake Henshaw.
Okay.
And then we built a 100-mile-long flume. I mean, think about the
100
miles.
100 miles. The water comes from Lake Henshaw. It comes into Lake Wolford and Escondido.
Right.
And we have some shared facilities with Escondido. And then we have an underground pipeline that brings the water. It's underground and above ground in different places.
What's the circumference of that pipe? Is it one of
It's
those-
about 4 foot.
So it's
Okay.
underground. Or is it
Most places it's above ground. It was actually an
Okay.
open culvert, and then we covered it with concrete cover and called it a flume.
Okay.
And in some places it's become a pipeline, but primarily it's still above ground.
Right.
And in
Now,
fact,
do you need an easement from all the other cities? You have to get an easement so you guys can go on.
Yes.
Wow, it's a lot of stuff.
Does it go under any residential properties?
well, no, it doesn't.
Okay.
No,
How about
'Cause
through
you-
any reservations?
it does. It does go through some of the reservations.
And how do you work that out?
Well,
Carefully.
you know, I had the opportunity to sign a settlement with the tribes that was 48 years in the making, and it was something that I had actually been
Good clothes.
Yeah.
It was incredible because I'd actually had an opportunity on Capitol Hill. Our former Congressman Ron Packard had worked on this. Congressman Issa worked on it, and the tribes have worked on it. I mean, it was literally
It's a big deal.
3 generations of leaders worked on this. And so I was honored to show up at the last minute.
You should have taken
I'll
all.
sign, yeah,
take,
right.
Take
you
all
should
the
take all the credit.
I
did
I
this.
could take very little of it, but
I closed the deal. You closed the deal though.
Hey.
You're the closer.
Yeah, Daryl, why don't you close
Yeah.
it? Okay, John.
All these
John
guys
did
can
it.
close it. We got to get him in real estate.
Yeah, that's what I
He's a
said.
deal closer.
Yeah, Mark and I are both, obviously, you know, we're both licensed brokers, and that's what we do for a living, we sell houses. And what's really funny is that we've been doing it since about 2004. And when somebody couldn't afford a house in San Diego, we'd go, you know, let's look in Vista.
Right.
Yeah.
And what happened was, like everything, it was a small town. You get like acreage. You can go equestrian if you want. You can grow crops. You can have your nice house.
Right.
And it's been populated now
Now
because it's like that secret that's
well,
out.
now it's expensive.
Well, now those
Really,
houses,
if you can even
can't
find a
afford
house.
It's,
I don't even think you have that much of an inventory there.
No, very little.
As you know, nobody's got inventory right
Right.
now, and
Right.
we have very little. I thank God that we bought when we did. Our home value has doubled in 7 years, and
crazy.
I look at Tyler's generation, and I think, man, if I was in the market for a home today with interest rates and the prices of housing, I don't know how we do
You'd
it.
cry. Yeah. Well, that's why
Yeah.
people are going to Texas and all the other states.
That's right.
And we're actually, they don't, because we talk to the other states and they're like, quit sending
Yeah.
Californians over here because you're messing up our pricing.
Well,
now we're priced out.
Right.
And these
They
places,
they get upset.
yeah, they get upset.
Like,
you know what they call it? The C word. California.
Right.
And
Can we talk about the affordability crisis for a second?
Yeah,
Oh, we
absolutely.
can talk about
This is-
yeah.
we're going to dive into that.
This is something that is really one of the top two issues that's on the minds of
Yeah.
Californians right now. And I've got a message that's a little counter to the popular message, because right now, what the state, our state fathers and mothers,
Right.
to be gender politically
Yeah,
correct,
people,
yes,
persons.
our state parents.
Yeah.
Doesn't have the same sound.
No,
but,
can't
but
use
they,
parents anymore.
They want us to build vertical density.
Got it.
Right.
That's what they're forcing on us with SB
Stack
10
it up.
and
Right,
9.
right.
And, one of the things that I'm always asking people is, did that make housing cheaper in Manhattan?
Yeah. No.
Did it get cheaper in San Francisco or
No.
Boston?
Good question.
Wherever you have great vertical density, you have ever-increasing housing prices.
Good point of view. I like that.
Well, it's just,
You're right.
I like to just make observations of
You're
things
right.
that are indisputable truth and point them out. And we are being prohibited from building new communities to
Right.
the east of I-15.
Right.
I read an article, maybe it was actually a letter to the editor in today's Union Tribune, and it talked about exactly this. If we want, 40 years ago, the city of Temecula began to be developed. When I moved to California in 09 permanently and started coming here in 03, Temecula was a booming town, lots of new homes. And today I've got a lot of friends up there. They have new schools up there.
Oh, yeah. It's beautiful.
They're building employment bases up there, hospitals.
Right. Wine country.
Why are we opposed to building new communities in our state for young families to move to have a great quality of life? Why do we think that we can, we have this duty to never build? Yeah, I think it's people got on an airplane. It's the LAX to JFK crowd, right?
Right.
They went to sleep and never looked out the airplane window
Right.
to see that
All
there's a
that
lot of room
land.
for us to
A
grow.
lot of land.
There's a lot of space. And you know what? We can't all live in La Jolla Shores.
Right.
There's just not enough room for us all to be
Right.
there, even if that's where we'd all want to live. But we've actually begun to talk about it as a human or a civil right to live in whatever piece of land that we want. And wherever it is that you live, you own your home, and at least for the moment,
Right.
we accept the fact that your house is your property,
Right.
right? But we don't anymore. Hassan Akrada said to me, he said, people should have a right to live in any community that they work in. And I said, okay, explain that to me. I said, so like Rancho Santa Fe or La Jolla, people should have a right to live there no matter what their income is. And he said, well, I'm not, very familiar with the neighborhoods here. He had just moved from Los Angeles. And I said, okay, like Palos Verdes Estates. So if I work in Palos Verdes Estates, I should have an absolute right to own a home or to be able to rent in Palos Verdes Estates. And he said, yes, absolutely.
Then
Now-
Burger King would have to pay them $18,000 an hour
Right.
to.
Well, they can have the right if they can afford it.
Well, they have a right to live there, but it didn't say
Right.
More specifically,
But they're-
Frank, his point was that the government, that you and I
have to subsidize
should
it.
subsidize
Yeah,
it so that
they
can
want
live
us to
there.
pay for it.
And I said, but the city of Torrance is right next door, and it's much more affordable. It's a more middle and working class community. And he said, no, they have a right to live in Palos Verdes the same as anybody else. So what they really want to do is they really want to break down and for me, I don't live in Rancho Santa Fe. I live in Shadow Ridge in Vista.
Right.
Okay. I live in a neighborhood. I bought my first home in Shadow Ridge for $300,000.
Right.
And so, you know, let me put it right out there. My parents weren't rich. I'm not rich.
Right.
My dad died when I was very young. He was 60 when he died. I didn't get a big inheritance. And,
Sorry.
you know, well, it's all right. I don't mind. I mind that he died, but not that I didn't get an inheritance.
Right.
To me, it's important that people know that I'm a business owner. I've got 5 employees, and I have worked very hard for everything that I've got.
Absolutely.
And I've been successful. God has blessed me, and
Right.
you know, people have rewarded me for my hard work. But it's important because some of the issues that we're getting into, if we really want to talk about them, we gotta describe where the motive is coming from for some of these policies. And the idea that we ought to all be able to have a house that's subsidized because we don't like the fact that, you know, Rancho Santa Fe or La Jolla are unaffordable. Well, and San Diego generally is becoming unaffordable because why? Because we have a great economy. We have the world's best weather.
Right.
It's America's finest city.
Right.
You know, if we want people to have a quality of life, then we can't continue to have this false argument that everybody should be able to live on the same square inch of land. Obviously, we're going to have to build new communities. Our parents knew that.
Right.
Why have we forgotten about the importance of building new communities?
Right.
And the consequence of refusing to build new communities is that the community that I represent as mayor of Vista, the people in Vista do not want great vertical density foisted upon them. They like the density. We're 3,000 people per square mile right now. Compare that with Manhattan Island, which is 30,000 people per square mile. Vistans are happy at 3,000 people per square mile. Okay, we don't want high-rise buildings, but yet because of changes to state law, some of my colleagues are supportive, and they're talking about. One of my colleagues said, "quote We should be talking about building 25-story buildings in the city of Vista," and I went, "Whoa, nobody here wants that." Right. But yet, right now, they're building a 16-story building and 2 20-story buildings in the city of San Marcos, and when I tell people that, their eyes get big and they can't believe it, but they're going to believe it when they see them spring up out of the ground along the highway. That's going to be in
what kind of buildings?
North City, residential and commercial.
Okay.
So the character they want to turn and when I say I love tall buildings, I've lived in tall buildings. I love them. I lived downtown Kansas City. I lived on Capitol Hill. I loved when I was a young person. I loved that urban environment. It was exciting.
Right.
And then when I got a little older and I wanted to have a family, I moved into a suburban environment because
Right.
that's what I wanted. And so I say, if you want to live downtown, I took my wife. We don't often go downtown. In fact, I don't think we've gone downtown for years. But I took her down. We saw the Cirque du Soleil show.
Oh, the new one
last night.
How was it?
It was very good. Yeah, I recommend
What's it?
it.
What do they call that? What was the name?
Corteo.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Those guys make me nervous
Yeah,
because you always think something's going to happen. They're going to fall.
But we went to eat at a restaurant. We're watching the construction going on. It was at a standstill because it was Sunday night. But we're watching the construction, and they're building new towers downtown, and great.
Right.
Build
Build away.
Yeah, build all you want downtown. If we want, if you want to solve transportation problems for people, build vertical density where vertical density already exists.
Correct.
But why are you making the city of Vista build vertical density when the people there don't want it?
Right.
We shouldn't be forced into it. So we got to talk about these things, and I got to stand up for the people that I represent that don't want that.
So I'm going to give you a counter on that.
Please.
Because I hear both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the current president of the San Diego Association of Realtor, and they're going to say, hey, we like that you don't want it, but at the same time, you're going to complain about homelessness and people camping on your streets and having nowhere to go and living in their cars. So what's the solution? If you don't want to go vertical, then how would you solve the housing crisis, the home affordability crisis, all the other epidemics that are going on? What would be your answer?
So affordability is kind of like the second major issue of our time. The first major issue of our time is homelessness.
Yeah, we all know that.
I'm sorry, but I don't believe that the affordability crisis is driving the homeless crisis.
I agree.
If we're going to solve any problem, then
Identify it.
first we have to be honest about the drivers of that problem.
Absolutely.
We have major regional authorities like Sandag that claim that only 5% of those who are living unsheltered on our streets are addicted to narcotic drugs.
Yeah, well, flip
just
that.
not
It's
true.
actually 98%.
5% are not.
That's
Yeah.
correct. That's correct. About 95% are
They
addicted.
just read it
Right.
wrong.
Right.
Well,
Right.
you would have to ask them what their motives are
Right.
for advancing information that any reasonable person
Can see.
would know is false.
Exactly.
But this idea about, if you want to understand, right, you want to understand people's motives, look at where the money is, look at where the power is. They are using the people who are living unsheltered on the streets, and I'm gonna get to this. This is complicated, but this is, in my opinion, very true. They're using people that we all see who are living unsheltered, and they're using them to try to bring about major political changes
Exactly.
that have a financial benefit to some groups of people. You've got a brother, he's sitting right here. Would you ever let him live on the street?
No.
As long as you have a place in your home? And same
No.
for you.
Right.
Would your children ever live homeless?
I let them live in the garage.
Right? Well, hey, that's better than living
In
on
one
the street.
section. I do have a section. Because when his wife gets pissed, he's in my garage.
Yeah.
And I understand
No,
that.
I know your point is.
I understand not everybody has a brother.
Right.
And some people really need our help. And that's why I was the one that built the homelessness strategic plan. I asked that our city make it the number one goal of our council. We have about 8 major goals. And I asked that we make it the number one goal, and we put it in first position to solve homelessness and the causes and symptoms of homelessness in our community.
I want to go over that plan with you. But first, I'm going to tell you, what do you think about my take? Because Mark and I, although we sell houses, we love the streets. Like, what's going on with these people? They're freaking human beings, okay?
Yep, that's right.
And we're stepping over them, and it's to me, it's disgusting. But what I see is
It's sad.
Yeah, it's sad.
It's cruel.
It's super cruel. So what I see is there was a study done because from the city, and they're saying that we believe all these homeless people are coming in from other states because we're making either. So they did a study. They found out like over 87% of the homeless people are from the community of San Diego. So here's my take. When you start taking drugs, you're typically in a house. You're probably 18, 19. Let's just go with the standard. The parents find out that you're smoking weed or doing drugs. They start going, hey, can't smoke weed in this house. And you can't shoot heroin in this house. There's certain rules to live in this house. The drugs overtake that, gets into people's mind, and they go, I'd rather have drugs than listen to my parents. So that tough love comes in. If you want to live under my roof, you got to follow the rules. If you don't, there's the door. I can't do this anymore. You're stealing my money. Things are missing. Right. This is weird. I love you, son. So they go into their friend's house. Yeah. After a while in their friend's house, the friend realizes, hey, man, what is going on? You prescription drugs, the Vicodin deal, the whatever, fentanyl. They get thrown out. Then they're in somebody's garage. Mm-hmm. Okay, then there's couch surfing. And then eventually they're on the streets.
That's right.
So there's not a homeless issue. You got plenty of houses to go to. And I think to your point, like the brother, there's areas where people will take you in, but you're on drugs. So it's a mental illness crisis stemmed from a drug addiction.
So for nearly 4 years now, under the components of our homelessness strategic plan, we've hired outreach workers. We have about a dozen civilian outreach workers on our streets, in addition to about a dozen community-oriented policing and problem-solving sheriff's deputies who have been outreaching to the homeless for many years in our community.
Many years, yeah.
But we added a component of 12 civilian outreach workers. And we have very carefully documented every single interaction. And that was one of the mandates, again, that I asked staff is we want detailed data. We want to know if what we're doing is working, so go out and collect the information.
Got to measure it.
So we've had over 5,000 separate conversations with about 350 unique unsheltered people. And so many of these individuals we've had more than 20 separate conversations with, working every time to build rapport and trust.
Right.
94% of the time, they refuse to accept a shelter, nutrition services, mental health services, addiction recovery services that are available.
Right.
One of the problems that we talk a lot about shelter bed availability. For most of the last 3.5 years, we haven't been able to utilize the beds that we have provided. They've gone empty. And so, of course, if every single unsheltered person showed up at the shelter tomorrow, we could not shelter them all.
Right.
A lot of times we like to point out that there's more unsheltered people than there is shelter, but we're ignoring the fact that they're not all showing up, and we wish that they were. We wish the problem was that we needed to build accommodations for all these people because they wanted it. The problem is they refused to accept the help. They refused to go to the shelter. And you're absolutely right. They had an unsuccessful experience. Anytime, I don't care if you have your own mansion in a wealthy neighborhood or if you rent a room, there's rules, right?
There's rules.
You can't go into the middle of the street at 3 in the morning
Right.
and scream. You can't break into your neighbor's house. You can't threaten your neighbors.
Right.
And these things apply no matter what kind of living environment that you're in.
Right.
And so what has happened to people who are on narcotic drugs is they've had a psychotic break, a drug-induced psychotic break. And or their behaviors become antisocial.
Right.
And I just really illuminate this. I helped some people during the Santa Ana winds about maybe 8 months ago. It was 110 degrees in Vista. It was extremely hot. I mean, inhumanly hot. And I approached Lyle and Danita. They had 4 shopping baskets full of all their possessions.
You know them, huh?
I know him personally.
Right.
I got to know him, and I'll tell you, Lyle was kind of a rough-looking guy, and I walked up to him and I shook his hand, and I didn't know, if
how he's gonna react.
I didn't know if he was going to be happy with me
Right.
or not, and he collapsed and he cried and he said, I was praying to God that somebody would come and help me today.
Wow.
And it was one of those incredible life-changing experiences, And I've had a lot of experiences like that where I've walked up and gotten to know people, but I wanted to help them get into the shelter that day, and they really wanted to go because it was so, just inhospitable outside. And I got them into the shelter, and it was tough, but they got thrown out. And I use all these things, and I give my business card, my cell phone, to everybody I meet, including the people I meet who are living on shelter on the street. And I tell the folks that I've helped get off the street into a shelter, I say, I can't go and live in the shelter with you. I can't go through this experience to be rehoused with you. So I want one thing. I want you to give me a phone call from time to time, and I want you to tell me what's going on, and I want to understand through your experience, on the level of one human being, I want to understand the experience of going through the shelter and trying to work the programs. And so they called me and they said, we've been thrown out of the shelter. They were put into a motel. They got kicked out of the first motel.
Right.
And then they were put in a second motel. And they
There
were
we
kicked
go.
out of that one.
Yeah.
So I went to visit with the owners, local Vista ownership. And I went to meet with the owner of the hotel, and I said, I just want to understand why you had to throw them out. Because, by the way, right now they're homeless on the sidewalk in front of the motel. And I said, and they said to me, oh, it's simple. At 3 in the morning, every night for the last 2 nights, they would get in a loud argument. They woke the whole place up and had a big screaming match. And so we just can't have that here. And the point is, if you are not in a place, and they use this term, and there's a lot of terms, and some of them are BS and some of them are very real. The word housing ready is a very real term. It means that you're at a place mentally, psychologically, where you would succeed if we gave you a place to live. And it's great. It's this great thought. In all of our shelter beds in Vista, they're all low barrier, right? Low barrier means you're addicted to heroin, you don't want to quit. Great, no problem. Come on, we want to get you off the street, okay? We're not asking any questions, and as long as your behavior doesn't threaten, harm, other people, as long as it's not antisocial, then we want you in a bed, not living on the street. So we're not going to ask those questions. That's what low barrier is. And but I called Greg, who runs Interfaith, and I said, Greg, these people have been thrown out, and it's miserable outside. Is there any way to get them back in the shelter? And he said, John, if they couldn't succeed in a hotel room of their own,
There's no way they're going to.
he said they're not going to succeed here. Mm-hmm. And this is the hard reality: is if your mental condition, and this is the real foundational core of the homelessness problem, not affordability, is drug use and mental illness. Out of every 100 people who are suffering from mental illness and drug addiction, we need to use the force of government while defending and preserving the constitutional civil liberties of every American. We need to get some help for the people who are too sick to know that they're sick. That's a phrase that I've come up
So
with.
I got 2 counters.
Yeah.
And I don't say it, Mark, because I already know I think I know where you're going, but I'm going to go somewhere else because I think I can read your mind a little bit. The first thing is when you have people on the streets on drugs, you have the low bearing. Many cities don't. So in other words, here's the problem. They have a love affair that you can't imagine with a drug.
Right.
They will do anything for that love.
Yep.
It'd be like whoever's out there who is in love with somebody, you'll travel around the world to see this person. You'll do anything. Times that by 100. So they would rather do drugs than follow rules on most of these housing projects because they go, here's your bed, here's your food, it's all paid for. All you got to do is move. But we have one condition. Can't do drugs when you're here.
Right.
So it always goes back to the drug addiction. Now, the drug addiction, I think, if you want to go back and how we can help them, is what my brother talks about. And that's when, because he's been involved in education, it starts when they're in third grade.
Absolutely.
And no one sees it. You got that kid that's kind of like off to the side. Hey, Johnny, let's call him. Yeah, Johnny's kind of to himself. And then you see him start performing poorly. There's no counselor who's talking to this kid going, what's really going on? Let me gain your trust as a child. What's going on at home? What are you thinking? Let's somehow figure out, evaluate him, and start at that level. By the time they're 18, 19, you lost them.
Well, let's be perfectly honest. Our schools are out of control.
That's what I'm talking about.
And I'm not talking about the politics of who's using what bathroom.
Right. No, forget about that.
I'm talking about discipline.
Yes.
Okay.
Identifying mental illness.
The disciplinary problems in our schools, the unwillingness to deal with those students whose behavioral disorders are disruptive.
Right.
And the unwillingness to deal in a serious way with those students who are bringing drugs into the school and using them and habituating other students to use them, our unwillingness to deal with that. The fact that we have refused to allow the DARE program to continue, right, or some variant thereof.
And all that crap.
A police officer came into my school when I was a kid.
Me too.
And showed me these drugs and explained the impact of them.
You never want to touch them. Right.
You know, I had a father, I'll never stop being grateful that he taught me that drugs were something that would kill me, that would destroy my life.
Yeah, the fear of God into you.
He absolutely, he showed me the way with regard to drugs, that they were bad. And I've never, to this day, I've never used any narcotic drug, and I have no desire. But you're right, that's where the problem starts. But
well, here's what I'm going to say. Let me interrupt you for a second because I like where you're going with this, but I'm going to go somewhere different. I think the school district handles it wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. When somebody comes in because they got into a fight, when somebody comes in because they stole from someone's locker, took some food, bullied, they go directly to almost a law enforcement. Like, you will be expelled, you will be suspended, you will not do this, you will be, hammered. Instead of going, not anymore, there's a switch. Good, because that's the behavior that you have to identify as a mental illness crisis.
The pendulum. So the pendulum has swung, at least in the schools that I'm familiar with. Well, it's not good.
Okay.
Because the pendulum has swung so far in the other direction.
It's called restorative justice.
There is no more expulsion. There's no more suspension. Kids are not being given detention. There's no punishment. They don't want to. I mean, you're on the right track with this restorative justice thing. They don't want to punish them in any way that would separate them, and the idea of diversionary school for those kids whose behavior is so bad that it's stopping the other kids from learning.
Right, disruptive.
I don't want to get. We could talk a lot about the schools, and you're right. That's a big problem, but. The schools are run by an elected school board, and we need better people to step up and run for school board. But I want to talk about where we go with the problem that we've got now, the people that are on the streets.
Are we talking about your strategic plan right now?
Yeah. Well, let's hear about this is. I want to talk a little bit about what the real solution to homelessness is.
Okay.
Because there's an easy to understand solution and incredibly difficult to implement. It's real simple. Let me get this out real quick. We got to help the people who are too sick to know that they're sick. That means people who are mentally ill and drug addicted. You wouldn't leave your child on the street if you could do anything about it. If they were 17, you would use your power as a parent to compel them to get some treatment. And you'd bring them back into your house, and you wouldn't give them the freedom to go back to the street if you could do anything about it.
Right.
But if you're a 24-year-old son, there's nothing you can do because he's an adult.
18.
Absolutely.
If they're 18, everything changes.
So if we could get some help, we have 3.3 million people in San Diego County, and only 300 of them are in the conservatorship process right now. Dr. Luke Bergman is our county conservator. He runs that program. I've had meetings with him about this. We have a single judge in the entire county of 3.3 million people
Jeez.
who does mental competency hearings.
There you go.
We have 10,000 people that are mentally ill and addicted on our streets, but only a single courtroom and a single judge.
In the
Now,
whole county.
we're spending upwards of $80,000 in the state of California. We have about 116,000 people we've reported to the federal government that we believe are unsheltered in our state, and we're spending about $80,000 on housing and homelessness services. If we divide that
Right.
You know,
Each.
for each.
Right.
Now, why don't we take some of that money
Right.
and move it into the courtroom services?
Right.
You know where a lot of that money goes? That money goes to outreach. I told you we're having 20 separate conversations. We're out there begging and soliciting people to accept the help who are too mentally
They
ill
can't make a decision.
to make a rational choice
They're
decision.
yelling at a trash can.
That's exactly right. I had a conversation with a woman, absolutely heartbreaking. Her leg was in the shape of a bow. She had been injured. I think she was hit by a car while she was living as an addict on the streets. And because of her mental illness, I mean, if she'd come to the hospital, they would have set and fixed her leg
Right.
for free. But she was too mentally ill, and with the addiction. By the way, we're standing in front of a one-story building,
Right.
and she's screaming that she's the owner of the building. They won't let her in, and she lives on the second floor of the building. It's a one-story building.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, she's out of her mind.
She was out of her mind with drug
Right.
psychosis.
Yeah, she needs help.
She needs help, and this is a woman.
you
that
can't arrest them and
She
throw 'em
laid
in.
she laid in a tent, incapacitated for months because of this broken leg,
Jeez.
and didn't seek help. This is the compassionate and
right.
moral and just society that we live in.
Right.
Is that we let a woman with a broken leg
Right.
lay in a tent and have her leg bowed the rest of her life, and it's never fixable now. And we don't help her when she says she lives on the second floor of a one-story building,
Right.
and we do nothing to help her. And
Right.
the mental health professionals are powerless because the judges don't have the political will, the politicians don't have the political will. Collectively, and this is why I'm here today. This is why I'm serving as mayor. One reason: we will never stop the problem. We will never fix the problem or change the problem if we can't first readjust the public's thinking. We need the political will to help people who are too sick to know they're sick. We need to help maybe 1, 2, or 3 people out of every 100. Because, if Frank is living on the street and you're living there with him, and we bring Frank before a judge, he's got a right to a unanimous jury verdict, okay? Under the United States Constitution, you can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That means a jury trial, unanimous jury verdict. Only for 1 year at a time can we put you into treatment. So we bring you before a judge and a jury. The Constitution says you've got a right to a lawyer to defend yourself. The Lanterman-Petrus Short Act in California says you have the right to a psychiatrist, medical doctor to diagnose, and you have the right to a patient's right advocate who will make sure you're properly attired in court, make sure you show up on time for court, make sure that you understand, spend as much time with you as necessary, make sure your family shows up there to support you, to do everything that we can to make sure that your rights are defended. And after all of that, a lawyer to defend you, a unanimous jury, psychiatrist, okay, this is what the law requires to defend your rights, and we should, okay? We must stand up for, nobody's a stronger defender of the Constitution than I am. So, but after we have spent the resources to defend your civil liberties, and every person on a 12-person jury says, you know what, Frank is not making good choices, he's harming himself, okay? And we get him into a 6-month recovery program, the goal of which is to get him back into a place where he's ready to be housing ready.
Right.
And then we can get him into permanent housing.
Right.
And I come to you, Mark, and you're living in the encampment that we took Frank out of, and I say, look, Frank was too far along with his illness to understand that he needed this help. Now, we've been here to talk to you 4 times before and offered you these services. If you don't take them this time, when we come back next time, we're going to arrest you, and we're going to bring you before the same judge and a new jury, and we're going to have a competency hearing, and we're going to consider a conservatorship. Now I have the tool to cause you to use the last capacity of rational choice that you have as somebody who's addicted and maybe suffering mental illness to make a voluntary decision. How many people out of 100 would make the voluntary decision to accept? Right now, remember, I said 94% are declining our assistance. If I could even just help 3 out of 100 on an involuntary basis and do it while protecting their civil liberties, then when I come to see you, Mark, and you're in the same encampment, I say, I took Frank already. Now, if you don't take the help that we're offering, we might compel you by a judge and a jury.
It might go up.
I think the compliance rate or the acceptance rate of our assistance would dramatically increase, right?
John, can I just want to backtrack?
That's the solution.
Right.
I want to
That's good.
backtrack a little bit.
That's what we all knew that was a solution.
Well,
it's just implementing
It's
it.
part of it.
Nobody is speaking that truth. Who's the last person you heard say this? To say that we
You're
want to
it.
use the force of
No
government
one.
to involuntarily help people who are too sick to know that they're sick.
Newsom's
Nobody's got. You're right. Governor Newsom is saying it.
Newsom is saying it. He said he has care court, but I want to just address one thing.
And he talks about conservatorship.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
The governor's
I
right about
I
this.
don't agree with everything he does, but
Right.
I do agree with this.
Even a
Right.
stop clock's right twice a day.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I think you're on the right track, but what you're doing is you're treating those people at the end, and there's going to be a slew of more people that keep entering this. So as Frank was saying, when you have a child sitting in class that's suffering from depression, anxiety, then maybe they want to harm themselves, and they're not given the care or the treatment, the medical treatment that they need, a lot of them will start to self-medicate because of the accessibility of marijuana and all these drugs. So as they start to self-medicate, their performance in school goes down. And then when their performance in schools go down, their grades go down, and it just spirals. So you have a pipeline right now of future homeless people. And you're just gonna be doing conservatorships till the sun for a millennial time.
Right.
So what I'm thinking is all this homeless money that's out there should be reallocated to the schools to implement two things. One, a comprehensive drug education program, not like DARE, but that's embedded in the curriculum. And you know how there was a big push for diversity and
They embedded
equity.
that in.
That's embedded in the curriculum.
Right.
You know, math is racist.
Yeah,
or
the same
this is
motivation should be in for this.
So I think that we could do this, but it would have to be the same kind of campaign that we did in the 60s. So in the 60s, you'd have 50, 60% of the kids smoking. And if you told somebody back in the 60s, we're going to eradicate kids from smoking, they would say, it's not going to happen.
Right, good luck.
But it took 40 years, and there's this massive decline. Yes, now they're vaping. Okay, that's something that we have to also deal with. So when you look at a ratio of counselors to students, it's 500 to 1. There's just not enough counselors. So until the school districts have the money and the resources and the will to embed a comprehensive drug education program, I think that you're going to be doing conservatorships forever.
Well, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying right now. I mean, 10,901 people died last year of overdose death in the state of California, according to the CDC. What's it going to take for us to decide that our students need to be educated about the dangers of narcotic drug use? You know, right now I'm in a big debate, and I'm one of the few leaders who stepped forward to say that handing out crack pipes to people, there's this argument that says, well, but they're spreading hepatitis C.
Right.
Okay, and I said, all right, well, that's not a good thing. We don't want people to spread hep C, right? But how many people is that killing in the state of California every year?
You know what they said when they handed out those crack pipes? They didn't like them. They said, these crack pipes suck. If you're going to hand out crack pipes...
Let me design that for you.
I got some... They did, really. I'm not BSing.
No, you can't make this stuff up.
But listen to this. You know what they're doing now? They're creating a vaccine for opioids. So if you're taking fentanyl, what they're saying now is, hey, we can vaccinate you. If it gets to the phase 1 study, nobody knows. So what kind of a message, like what direction are these people going with?
Right.
Instead of actually treating the root cause, which I believe is untreated mental illness at a very young age. I mean, I was an elementary school teacher. I could see the kid that was just...
There's always a few kids where you just go, ooh.
And you were lucky, John, because you had a father that talked to you. A lot of kids. I mean, there's certain communities where 70% of the kids are born out of wedlock. There ain't even a dad around.
Sure, you don't even know who you're
talking
about.
I know that if my parents had modeled drug use to me, that I certainly...
You'd be doing drugs.
I probably would be doing drugs.
Right.
But I think you're 100% on the right track where, hey, we got to... It's like a fire. We got to put this out right now because this is out of control. Do you hear that? Just some guy just got stabbed in L.A. by a homeless dude, just randomly. He's just standing there, and he got stabbed. And so, how many more stabbings,
Well,
killings?
It's like 85% of all violent crimes are homeless against homeless.
Frank,
It's all
tell
in the news.
them what happens when they go to the ER.
Well,
Because no people don't even know about this.
Well, there's a big. I mean, if you want to know why you go to $500 a Band-Aid, and all this, you're homeless. You do a trauma, not an ER call, but a trauma call, which means you have to have a stabbing. There's certain criteria to make it go trauma. Well, getting hit in the back of the head with a hammer is a trauma.
Right.
Those people get taken to the trauma center. The bill to go in a trauma door is like $30,000 just to walk in, and then you got the surgeons. You have them. Then you have the rehab, and then you cannot no longer release from the hospital unless you have an alternative where to go. So people don't know there's places like Scripps Mercy that has 2 floors of people that are just live there.
Right.
Like they live there. There's nowhere else to put them. So the state mandated once you care for someone, you can no longer release them unless you have a shelter to go to. If the shelters are loaded, they stay in the hospital as much as they can. So what does that do with the amount of money it takes to have this one guy, a preventable, it's preventable. This is an attack. Person should have been in jail. There should be cops dealing with the crime, but they keep allowing it and allowing it and allowing it. So it's costing everyone millions of dollars just for the medical impact alone. So homeless, like I've always said, affects everything.
Absolutely.
It affects everyone. It affects commercial. It affects residential. It affects TOT.
We were talking about subsidized housing and low-income housing, and I've supported a lot of, especially senior low-income housing. Inez, my grandmother I mentioned earlier, she lived in HUD housing the last decade of her life, and it was a game changer for her. She had $400 a month in Social Security income, and it really gave her a quality of life, and more importantly, it gave her a community of people. So I really support that. I've supported I support direct subsidy model. It's a whole other conversation. We've got a big debate in Vista about inclusionary housing versus direct subsidy. Direct subsidy, everybody pays for. Inclusionary housing is a tax on housing, and it's a tax only on lower income housing, and so it makes the people at the lower end of the
always
income
affects
spectrum
the people
pay
they're trying to
more,
help.
right? And because such a small number of people get it, and because all of the people at the lower end of the spectrum income spectrum are paying more for it, I can't be for it. But we have 42,000 homes in the city of Vista. 103,000 people live in 42,000 homes. 774, 1.8% of our housing stock in Vista is government subsidized. And one of the things that I like to ask other policymakers and other opinion leaders is what percentage of our housing stock should be subsidized?
Right.
Should it be
That's the
2%, 5%, 10%?
Exactly.
I asked one of my colleagues, I said, do you think that it should be, because she wouldn't answer that question. And I said, well, just tell me this. And she's on the left side of the aisle.
Spectrum.
Yes. And I said, do you think that it should be more than half of all of the housing units? And I said, this is not
Half?
it's not a trick question.
Right.
It's not a trick question.
Right.
Do you think that more than half of all homes should be paid for by the tax-paying public?
And her answer was yes.
No, her answer was, well, I'm
More.
not sure. I couldn't say.
Wow.
And I'm going, how do you mean you couldn't say? I mean, obviously, we can't pay to house, but
50%.
there are some that want to see universal housing.
Right.
Some have called for universal basic income.
Right. They go, housing is a human right.
You have to look at what the motive is. I started the conversation by saying you have to
Follow
look at
the
what the
money.
motive is.
Right.
What are the political motives? I mean, we're paying for, we've provided for your, and I don't want to debate whether we should or shouldn't, because I'm not a hard partisan on any of this. I mean, we should be paying for some health care. We're paying for all health care. We should be paying for some education. We're paying for education, and unfortunately, it's like Paul Harvey said, if you think these things are expensive now, wait until they're free.
Yeah.
Right? But and that's come to pass. But now the last thing that we haven't really addressed as far as paying for is your housing bill. And if you want to truly understand why people who live on the streets are being used as pawns, it's because there's a policy objective that says we want as much government-funded housing as possible. my problem is I got 350 at most. I got 350 unsheltered people. I got 774 housing units. If the subsidized housing was intended to solve the homeless problem, I've got twice as many. They could each have their own unit. I've got twice as many units as I need to solve the problem. When the units become vacant because people move out on their own, I could just move those people in. Problem solved. Right? If I built 1,000 more units, Frank, it's not going to solve the problem. Why? Because they have refused to go into a housing model because, again, we talked about this earlier. It does not matter what kind of home I give you to live in. There are some rules.
Right.
Yeah,
If you try to light the place on fire or you threaten to kill your neighbor, you're not going to be there for very long. If you're not housing ready, if you're not stable, if you're not accepting some rehabilitation mental health services, we can't house you. So we're looking at building board and care. We're looking at building permanent supportive housing. We've got RFPs out.
That's the solution.
We are doing, because you mentioned earlier, 85%, at least 75% of the people who are homeless in our city were housed permanently in our city before they became homeless.
Right.
And that's a big debate, and a lot of conservatives don't agree, and they think these people are being bussed in. But I have taken the time to meet these individuals, and more important, I've met their parents. And
there you go.
They were housed in our city. Their parents live in our city. I had a heartbreaking conversation with a man who, I was talking to my friend JR who was homeless, and I helped him get into the shelter in Escondido, which is supported financially, paid for by the city of Vista. And there was another gentleman, and he was probably about 75, maybe he was 80. And his son was about my age. And he was in a Grand Marquis, and his son got out of the passenger side of the car and was trying to get through a fence into a vacant facility. He was looking for a place to sleep for the night.
Right.
And I flagged him down, and I gave him my business card, and I said, we have shelter beds available if you're looking for a place to stay tonight. And he said, I'm not homeless. He said, my wife and I live here in Shadow Ridge. Our son is addicted to fentanyl. He says, I want to tell you, 1 year ago, our older son got out of jail. The day he got out of jail, he overdosed and died on fentanyl. And he said, today, my younger son is addicted to fentanyl. And he says, when he's addicted to the substance, and we talked about people getting thrown out because they're stealing money. The reality is they get kicked out when they become violent. Right. And mom and dad are in their 70s and 80s. The number one category of people who are dying on the streets of overdose is 35 to 44. That's the number one category. How old are your parents when you're 44 years old?
70.
Okay. They're at a place in life where they can't cope anymore with somebody who's violent. Right. They need some peace in their life and some stability. And so this man, with tears in his eyes, he said, every week or so I come out and I drive around and I hope I can find my son. And we bring him home and we feed him and we wash his clothes and we let him get a shower. And we tell him every time if he was sober and he, could be, it wasn't violent, that he could be at home. But when he's on the drugs, he's violent. His mom and I are scared. And he said, we have no choice but to bring him back out to the streets and hope that we can find him again in a week or two. And the pain in that man's eyes, I'll never forget as long as I live.
Right.
Because here was a man
helpless.
Who obviously wished that society would do something to help him help his son. Right. And who's doing something? I mean, where's the help? It's not there.
John, I wanted a couple of things, Frank, before you interrupt me. Because when Frank asks a question, you ever notice how long it takes for him to ask a question? It's really long.
Look how long he's taking right now to tell me.
But
that
I'm just like letting you know that
your line is supposed to be. Is there a question here, Mark?
Yeah,
right.
What's
exactly.
the question? Right.
Well, so you're a unique politician.
I was going to say that.
I know you were.
He's the only guy who has a feet on the street.
No, he's a unique politician.
Right.
And you're motivated to go into public service because you look at it as a public service. But that's not the case with these politicians that are being placed in there by what I call, and some people, I didn't coin the phrase, the homeless industrial complex.
Right. The hick.
Yeah.
Right.
So what you'll have is, and I had this conversation with my wife because she's saying, it's some blogger said it's not fair that these people put in so much money in a campaign and they get their person in. I go, well, that's not how it works. How it works is the organizations will find a person and say, let's put our puppet in there. Who is it? I mean, look at Fetterman. Not to say that, I mean, I feel bad for the guy. He's a stroke victim. And he still beat out a pediatric Harvard-trained surgeon, like, who is old, because these guys have so much money that they can influence politics.
Right.
So I believe that you're the exception, and it's really hard for people like you that have to deal with all this
colleagues,
big money that are putting in people that are not representing the people. Yeah. Like, you know, they always talk about special interest, but they're actually put in there and are given their marching orders and said, you will do this.
I'm just going to say it. I've said things this morning that could be taken and used out of context against me.
Oh.
The idea of treating people on an involuntary basis who are too mentally ill to acknowledge, you know, who have anosognosia, which means to not know a disease, is the medical term to describe somebody who's
too sick to know that they're sick.
Too sick to know that they're sick, right? So, you know, I've said a lot of controversial things, but there are things I truly believe are right, and there are very few people willing to stand up and say things that they might not get reelected for.
Right.
But you know what? Again, God's blessed me with a great family and a great business, and let me be clear. I love serving. Being mayor is the best title. It's the best job anybody could ever have. Yesterday, a woman. I mean, look at me. I'm not a model, but a woman came up to me, wanted her photograph taken with the mayor. You know, that feels great.
When you go in the grocery store, do people recognize you and
Absolutely.
go? Do they ever come up to you and go,
all the time.
"Hey, I just want to talk to you about my street.
Absolutely.
I got these potholes."
I get about 5 inquiries every day. Some of them are in person. About every manner of issue. Cut my trees down, fix my pothole. Why haven't you solved the homeless problem?
Right.
You name it. But I absolutely love this job. But I'm blessed that if the people don't invite me back, I'm going to be okay. This is not the thing that I need. It's the thing I want to do to serve. We need more people who don't care about being reelected. They care more about solving the problems.
Right.
I challenged staff this morning in a call I had where I said, and I say this to people frequently, I say to them all the time, I said, what are you doing with your career of public service that will be meaningful to you after you retire? What will you look back on and say, I really had a hand in solving that problem? Not just in
cheerleading in the background.
In the churn, as my friend Chris Magasin, who runs Solutions for Change, who introduced me to the concept of the homelessness industrial complex. The HIC, he calls it. We had a San Diego County Taxpayers Association had a press conference that I was at last week, and we are demanding greater accountability from homelessness service providers. We're providing millions and millions of dollars, but the problem continues to get worse.
Throwing money at it is not
You know how
working.
much money those people, the CEOs that run these things?
Well, it's
$300,000-$400,000 a year.
That's where the money goes.
And
It's so
I
gross.
told you we spent millions of dollars to solicit people, build rapport with them, to get them to say yes to go to the shelter. And in the last few months, we have people have been declined, and they say, bed not available. Now, it's not that they've filled up all 48 of the beds that they have at their facility. It's that they had a staffing shortage. They have a COVID outbreak. They didn't have a lower bunk, and they're afraid they're going to get sued by somebody that they'd offer an upper bunk, but they won't take it because maybe they're disabled, or maybe it wasn't a bed for a woman. But I said, look, it's unacceptable to tell me after I've spent millions of dollars to outreach to people and to get them to a yes to go to the shelter. When we've done all that, I used this analogy. I said, guys, I've got 30 guys that showed up at the construction site. I got 2 truckloads of lumber, and I'm missing 1 pound of nails.
Right.
That's a crisis.
Right.
Okay? The shelter beds actually aren't the greatest cost in this equation. They're actually a very small cost. The greatest cost is in the manpower to get people to say yes. So when we've expended all that dollars in manpower and I don't have the beds, trust me, as a public leader, I am furious. Right. And in fact, I asked the staff to put it on tomorrow night as an emergency item. I've never done that before, but I asked him, I said, this is an emergency as far as I'm concerned, and I want to talk about it. I don't know the answer or the solution yet, but we got to at least call it out.
To hold them accountable.
Well,
That's
we all
right.
know.
Hold them accountable.
Okay.
And that was the Taxpayers Association press conference last week, was demanding greater transparency. I need the specific information about why the beds are not available that we've paid for. Number one, I want my money back. I want your money back. It's your dollars, right? So I want your public dollars back to come to the city coffers. If you can't fulfill a contract and you can't call me and tell me why you're not fulfilling the contract,
Breach your contract.
then you've got to give me the money back, right? That's number one. Number two, I need to know why you're not able to fulfill the contract because it's essential public health services. If you can't fulfill it, I need to find somebody else who can.
Right.
Or if you're missing some essential component, tell me what it is and let me be a part of the solution with you.
Yeah.
Maybe together
No,
we can find that
I get
solution,
it.
right?
It's like what they did with that place you went to, and they were giving you problems. Remember, together.
Oh yeah.
Or like some BS kind of excuse.
Right, right. Oh,
we
it's an
can't
excuse.
get this. What?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have,
you need
I have
specifics.
my daughter's disabled. She has cerebral palsy. She's 14, really smart. She communicates on the iPad, gets good grades, goes to regular school. But there are places that, when you need help, that they turn you down because like one thing is wrong. Like
The water fountain's not working today.
right. It's just
Like
it's
what?
it's
No,
insane. And we can't take her
How's
to
she going to
school.
reach it? It's not working. We can't accept her.
Right.
What?
But let me tell you
Ridiculous.
something, John. First of all, the reason why we're talking to you is because we respect you. And I think that it's coming to a point where that pendulum is turning. You can only coddle people so much. And you got to say, listen, if you want to give me the BS about hook 'em and book 'em and we're going to start arresting people and all that, it's like you guys are not living on the street. You guys are not the ones suffering. You guys don't know what it's like to live on the street for one night with nothing and then being starving and trying to get water and trying to figure out where you're going to go to the restroom. You guys are just throwing rocks all the time saying that we don't want the government to take control. It's time to take control and say, if you don't get your shit together, we will hook you and we're going to put you in here. You can call it an arrest. You can be negative, but someone has to actually physically pick you up like a child because you don't know what you're doing and put you in a place where you can get help. And if you go through this help in 6 months, you're going to come out and go, you saved my life. So who cares what you're always going to get the other side. Yeah, you're always going to get the other side that are giving you crap, but who cares?
Rhode
You gotta
Island,
fight.
New York,
Right.
some of these extremely conservative East Coast states have programs where they have court-ordered medication-assisted
Follow
treatment.
what works.
Right? They force people to take Suboxone, Suboxone, methadone, and they have a wonderful new drug. It's injectable, Vivitrol, which is a cocktail of Suboxone and other drugs that are
The anti-opioid kind of stuff.
That's exactly right. And it stays in your system for 30 days, and it's an
Yeah.
anti-opioid. And it actually can prevent you, if it's in your bloodstream for 30 days, it can prevent you from dying of an overdose if you do have a relapse.
Got it.
So there's some great drugs out there that
and
we
there's
need to be treating
antipsychotic
people.
medication that you can take that you can last.
right.
They don't have
Right,
to take
they
the
need
pills
to be
every day.
medicated.
right.
There's
Very
suffering on the
important.
street, John. No one. I found out that the people who are trying to protect the rights of the homeless, they don't care about the homeless. They care
don't
about the
seem to.
concept of the rights and leave me
Well,
alone.
they think they care about them.
Well, you're right.
They believe that
let-
they care
let me-
about them.
let me
they believe
underscore
they're
this.
protecting them, but
I have a colleague who sits on our city council, and after I told you we've had 5,000 outreach engagements, 5,000 conversations.
it's
So
incredible.
we have this new. I saw actually Congressman Issa. He asked me. He said, "John," and this is a few years ago. He says, "What has Beverly Hills done to be able to address this problem there?" And I looked, and they have this ambassador program, and they have people. So we brought an ambassador program to Vista. I borrowed it or stole it, whatever you want to say.
Doesn't
from,
matter,
from
share
Beverly
it,
Hills.
right.
It's a good idea.
Right.
And our downtown business owners love the fact that we have people down there whose job it is to keep the streets safe and clean. And then I looked and I said, that's what we have for the downtown. I've got shopping carts abandoned everywhere in the rest of the city. Let's create a thing. We call it the Community Improvement Team. 2 guys with F-150 pickup trucks and a lift gate. If they see a couch on the side of the road, we don't drive past it anymore.
Right.
We've got a couple of guys whose job it is to make our city beautiful and clean.
Right.
And so that's the ambassador team for the rest of the city.
It's a good idea.
And I told the staff, I said, I want every member of our staff to be empowered. I have in my phone the phone number for our homeless outreach team. That means that I'm capable of connecting any homeless person that I come into contact with our homeless outreach workers. I said, I want every city employee to be similarly empowered with that telephone number, and I want it to be part of every employee's job description and duties. If they meet somebody that needs help, they can connect them. It's their job to connect them with the right people to get help. We don't walk past somebody in need and say, nothing to see here, or somebody else's job to help them. Okay, so we reported that the two gentlemen that are our community improvement team, the community ambassadors, they had 2 outreach engagements for homeless persons. Now, remember, this is not their primary job function. This is an ancillary job function. They've been empowered to take this authority. We had a report for 6 months. In that period of time, we had about 1,800 engagement conversations with our actual homeless outreach workers, but only 2 over here. One of my council members says, well, we should eliminate the outreach because they only had 2 engagements. And this is one of the people who is one of these, would never be for any of the stuff I'm saying.
Right.
And she didn't do the reading, didn't have the comprehension. We've been doing this for 3+ years, and she didn't have the comprehension of the fact.
Yet she still
that
got
we're having
elected.
thousands of conversations.
She still got elected. So how'd she get elected? Who put her in there? Somebody put her in there.
I'm hopeful
Can I
that
give you an
I'm hopeful the
idea?
voters will put somebody else in
Right.
because the comprehension and then the philosophy and
That's what I'm talking about.
What you were talking about, them not really wanting to help people, the fact that she illuminated the fact that she did not have her mind into the detail, did not have a command of the details,
Right.
and then she stands up to advocate against any kind of involuntary treatment.
Yeah.
If you have not done the reading and you have not done the research and you haven't met the people on the
Then you
street,
should be irrelevant.
then how do you stand up
yeah.
and claim that you're a warrior to defend people's rights?
Right.
You're defending the right of somebody who's mentally ill
Right.
to suffer from that illness?
They have no
How
background.
is,
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's inhuman.
But the hard thing is, when you're on a board, and I've served on many boards, elected and others, that you still have to work with her or him,
Right.
whoever it is. So you can't berate them in public
No.
because you're going
Right.
to
You need the-
think,
you need
and
the
then
political
even if you
capital.
take them off to the side and you're just like, you should read. I mean, just anything. So that's a challenge that politicians face.
I don't know if that would be received well. You should read.
Right.
But that is definitely the advice.
Well, you just said.
No,
like,
you're right.
yeah, but you can't.
That's
So
the instruction she needs. But how do you tell somebody? You should really read.
I don't.
If you
But see, so it happens all the time. You see this on city councils and meetings,
Right.
and you have the mayor that, even though you're trying to get something done, you'll see that there's going to be a percentage of your board or council that are just not like quite getting it. But then you wonder, how did that person get elected? Like, were the voters in her district or his district asleep at the wheel when this is going on? Like, how? Because
They don't know, Mark, because other people don't read it. They don't know.
no,
what these
because
elected
somebody
positions-
had money
right to back them up,
and they
We all know
put
that.
out these false narratives.
I never make the mistake of thinking that the people in Vista are putting a lot of energy and thought into what I'm doing or what the council's doing. It's definitely our job to inform them. It's my job as mayor now to let the constituents in that district know what their representative is doing and whether or not we need a better representative. And that's a responsibility I take very seriously. And in fact, I've recruited some great candidates to run in the city of Vista. I'm very proud of their people of faith. They're business owners. They both happen to be Latino, which I think is important because we're a city that's 50% Latino. They speak Spanish, but they're really good community-minded people that are very involved. And so I'm really excited about these 2 leaders. Denise Berrigan is one, and Dan Salas is the other. And recruiting the right people to run for council and helping them with their campaigns and making sure that they get introduced is a critical thing that a mayor does. That is so important. Every political leader needs to really go out and seek out the right people to run for office and introduce them to the voters. And it's our job to get the information out there. And then, of course, it is the job of every citizen to be engaged, to read, to understand. And people are a lot smarter than we give them credit for sometimes, and they do figure out what's going on. But sometimes it takes a while for them to catch up to where we're at. And, but this is why talking about it and what you're doing to help inform the citizens is so important.
As real estate brokers, one of the things we need to do is really know marketing. Okay, so our job is to market homes. So I'm going to give you a suggestion.
Yeah.
That phone number that you have in your phone, the outreach, that should be on a decal on every city vehicle you have.
I agree.
And police cars, fire, any city vehicle should be. Need a place to sleep
Right.
tonight? Call this number.
right.
outreach. Just an idea. The other one
And
is,
the other one should be our, if
That's
you want
such
to buy.
a good idea that I gave it to the staff about
You already
9
know
months
it?
ago.
Yeah,
and
all right. See, we
I'm
think the same.
struggling with this concept.
Now they have a problem with the design.
You know what?
It's like, get it done.
I wish that wasn't the dead on truth right there, what you're saying. But they really struggle with this concept. I told them, I like to give outrageous examples. I said, I want the Vactor truck. Vactor truck's the big vacuum truck with the
Right.
hose on the
Yeah,
front
okay.
that goes in the sewer. I said, I want the guy that drives the Vactor truck to be certified to connect people with our homeless outreach team. And they go, oh my God, that's not his job.
Yeah.
Certified?
Right.
Whoa. And I said, certified means he's got a business card in his glove box.
Right.
And he's empowered. He's been told that it's his job to stop if there's somebody he comes into contact with and to give them that business card so that and to make a phone call.
Right.
And he's empowered to do that. And getting the bureaucracy to accept the fact
There's no
that
way,
something as simple as that.
Right.
And in this war of, well, that's not my work and that's
Right.
not in my
So
job
my
description.
job description.
How can you run any kind of an organization when somebody looks and says, well, that's not my job?
Well, that's the bummer about being a public employee, because in the private industry, you're fired.
Absolutely.
So in the public, it's like, I got hired for this. I'm getting this wage. Now you're asking me to outreach. I want this much more money. Change my job. The bureaucracy stops everything. Just hand the homeless guy a card. Can you do that?
Do the right
and that's
thing.
That's the problem.
do the right
so
thing.
the problem is that the citizens are worried about the politicians trying to solve something that they created. And there's not a lot of trust for the cops. There's not a lot of trust for the politicians. They don't want to see the cops going to arrest people based on mental illness. They're going to use that to gain power over their civil rights. So you have to solve that too. So you know what I mean? It's not as solvable as it seems. But we have to start somewhere. And if everyone's just quiet in the background, nothing's going to get done.
If we say things that are true that are incredibly difficult, like the things I've said this morning that I know are politically dangerous to say,
but it's accurate.
But they are accurate.
Right.
They're truthful.
They're
if
based
we
on
speak the
studies.
truth about the cause of problems, then and only then can we begin to solve those problems.
Correct.
And so by changing the conversation and creating the political will and making a safe space for other leaders to follow on behind me to go, I think Franklin's onto something. And and I have often praised Gavin Newsom for talking about conservatorship and talking about
if they do something good, you got to praise them.
CareCourt is
a good thing.
short of conservatorship, but it's a good thing. Unfortunately, it's been way too slow in coming.
Right.
But I support it, and when folks I don't always agree with are right, I'm gonna make sure and compliment them and uplift them and make that space. I think the overwhelming majority of Californians are in favor of doing the right thing on the homeless problem. They want to see it solved. In fact, they're angry at government for its inability to solve it. They can't understand why we haven't been able to do something more significant yet. And it's because the emperor has no clothes, and absolutely nobody is willing to say the emperor has no clothes. They're all afraid that they're going to be put to death.
Exactly.
I think that in addition to having that, on all of the city vehicles and all the police cars, like if you see somebody who's homeless, or you can put that phone number right under it. It should be, if you need to buy or sell a house, call the Powell brothers.
Exactly.
Stick our phone number on there. I think that'd be a good thing.
I'll look into
Am I
that.
right, Frank?
I would vote for that.
Yeah.
I think it's a really
Let's
good
put that
idea.
out run that by your council. See what they say.
Here's another problem. I know you got a busy day, but I'm going to run this by you. Here's the other problem that we see: the bipolarization of Democrats versus Republican.
Yeah.
If there's an R by your name and you have a good idea, you're not going to vote for it because it's a one-party state.
Sometimes I joke that
right?
if I suggested giving puppies to orphans, that they would vote against it
Right.
just because of it's my
That's the problem too.
It's terrible. We've got to be able to, and I have colleagues that I have an extremely hard time having a conversation with, and then I have other colleagues on the other side of the aisle that I have great conversations with, and we don't always agree, but we always agree about the importance of sitting down and talking, and not assuming that you cannot assume that the other side's evil. It's what Reagan said, they're not evil, it's just that what they know is wrong. And you've got to be willing, and I've always said my whole life, it started when I was an academic in school. I said, I want to be open-minded, and if you bring me an argument and you can convince me I'm wrong, then I'll change my mind.
Right.
And sometimes I have been convinced that I was wrong. I mean, people with some modicum of wisdom are sometimes wrong, and they realize it. And that's wisdom, is the ability to see that you were wrong.
Sadly, you brought something up when you were in school. But our schools our higher education has been completely hijacked by far left liberal extremists. If you have a conservative view and you're going to UCSD or UCLA or University of San Francisco and they're talking about homelessness, and somebody in that class would write a paper advocating what you thought should happen,
they'd be given an F.
They'd be given an F.
Right.
You're right.
Because
And that is where students are being taught that if you present an opposing point of view, you're going to be singled out, canceled.
Right.
You're going to get an F. You're not going to be popular.
Exactly.
No one's going to like you.
Right.
The university experience used to be about
open dialogue,
discussing different points of view.
Not anymore.
The problem is
now
comedians don't even go to college campuses
now
anymore.
It's about conformity with one point of view, and that is a major place where the American system is dying, is because
that's where you're getting this pushback.
Without an honest conversation,
yeah,
we can't have a government. We just have an autocratic system.
The problem is it's not just it was universities. Now starting in grade school.
Yes, it is.
And now starting with you could tell the strategic is to get not just in the city council but start in the PTA, get on that little board. Join the community. We have to start the power. And it's almost like an internal war. And we all want the same thing. The problem is like, you guys put down your shields.
Yeah.
We're talking about humans. We're talking about, we're given, like, we could just go on and on. $100 billion is going to Ukraine. $100 billion? What the hell? I don't even know what $100 billion is. And we only have how many homeless people do we actually have? 100,000 maybe?
Throughout the state?
Yeah.
116,000.
Yeah.
So
We can't get
116,000
off the streets. Are you kidding me?
Right, and you're giving $100 billion to another country to figure out what's going on.
We sent a satellite.
It's not a money problem, and that is
You're correct. It's not
the most essential thing for everybody to understand right up front is the resources are being spent. They're just being spent on the wrong solutions, and that's why what I said last week at the Taxpayers Association press conference is we need to be willing to do the one thing government hates to do. Admit that we were wrong. We need to when our solutions we're funding are not working, we need to be willing to stop spending and stop funding those solutions, and we need to try something new. And you talked about the people that are making a lot of money running these organizations. They have a program to defend. They have employees that are implementing these programs. We had one program we paid $100,000 to help seniors find other seniors that wanted to share rooms so that they could have company, affordability, companionship. We helped one or two people with $100,000. That obviously was a horribly inefficient use of taxpayer dollars. We eliminated the program. It was a good experiment. I still think the idea was a good one, but it was terribly executed. And maybe a different provider would have done a better job. But, the provider still came to defend their program and to ask us to continue it. We said no, but it's important that we call out those failures as well as brag about our successes.
Well, if you look at the numbers, there's more homeless people on the streets today than there were 5 years ago.
Right.
So everything that they're doing is not working.
That's right. Yeah.
Everything. It's like none of this crap is working.
We didn't have this when we were just like, it was like 10 years ago there wasn't the homeless crisis.
There was one homeless person when we were growing up, and he was on TV. He was called Hobo Kelly. Remember that guy?
No.
He carried a knapsack, and he would walk around
He was like
aimlessly.
a cartoon guy. It doesn't matter, but that's the problem. They want a one-party state, and even if they had a one-party state, okay, fine.
We do have a one-party state.
Let's just say we're all Democrats. Everyone's the same. What's the solution?
Right.
You're still blowing it. Like, who cares about your political beliefs? There's a person that got hit by a car, is in a tent, doesn't get help. She's out of her mind, and everyone just drives by to go to their city buildings. What we seem
to have a divide between woke and not woke. It's not even Republicans versus Democrats.
Right, it's woke and not woke.
Right.
Because I have Democrat colleagues that we really see eye to eye on a lot of these issues.
Because it's reasonable.
And they're not on the woke side. And on this, Newsom is not on the woke side.
Right.
And, we ought to be able to build a majority of common sense leaders that are not trying to grandstand, and they're willing to say things that actually solve the problem. I think I'd get a lot more credit from the voters for solving the problem than just saying the things that seem like they sound like they're the right things
Right,
to
sound
say.
bites, the golden nuggets.
No.
And that's why Mark says you're different, because it takes an extreme amount, and I mean a real extreme amount of courage for somebody to, and I'm going to tell you why good people don't get into politics overall, because they see what happens when you get into politics.
Absolutely.
They'll take our podcast, they'll cut it, they'll have 3 words. He wants to arrest people, look at him, and they completely destroy you. But it used to be called mudslinging. Now the family, they found out your brother.
No, they want to destroy your business, your way of living.
business, right.
They'll go after you. They'll put up Yelp things on there and go, "This guy sucks. His business." And I don't even know who this person is.
They got robots doing it too, like with the Chat GPT. Wouldn't that be good if you had that when you're writing all those letters? I was thinking when you had to write those letters as an intern, can you imagine if you had Chat GPT back then?
Write me a letter.
No problem.
I have
You actually had to write it.
I have an employee who is evangelist for Chat GPT, and sometimes he'll write something and I'll read it and go, I don't think
you
so.
have to edit it.
It's not quite there yet.
Right, it's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
They have a lot of false information, a lot of really wrong information. So if you're going to use Chat GPT, use it as a tool that you must edit, like every sentence, because there could be a sentence way down here that's pulled from the archives that completely.
Well, there's another one.
destroy
There's
it.
also it's called Band, B-A-N-D. It's Google's Chat.
Oh, Google has a chat now.
Oh yeah.
Well, AI is
but
everything.
but Google Chat scrubs all of Google. Chat GPT, I think, goes back 4 or 5 years.
know.
It started collecting data.
Oh, maybe I'll go to Google.
Yeah, I've
use
tried
to my
it.
advantage.
I just wanted to experiment with it.
What do you want to do? So, what are you going to do after this gig?
Yeah.
You know
What's the
what?
plan?
I've got 3 years as mayor left.
Yeah,
That's
not good
what's
thing.
important to me.
Right.
And at the end of my term as mayor, I'll have.
This is your first term, right?
This is my first term.
So you can
but
get reelected.
I can.
Are there term limits?
There's no term limits, but
Wow.
But I believe in the concept of the citizen legislator.
Right.
I don't want to.
Career
I'm
politician.
finishing at the end of this term as mayor. I'm finishing 14 years in elective office serving the people of Vista.
Wow.
And that's a lot. And,
That is a
And
lot.
my wife reminds me of it every day.
Pass the baton.
My business reminds me every day.
Let
that
it go.
Well, at some point, the best thing that I can do to serve my community is to bring these other leaders in who have the right philosophy. I can show them the way, share the progress I've made, and set them on the right track. But there's got to be a constant flow of citizens who are leaders already in their community who we bring in by creating this permanent class of bureaucrat and permanent class of elected official that this is all they ever want to do. And it's the best job they've ever had.
Mayor Franklin, I'm going to
It's
tell you
scary.
something. That Mark and I, we interview several people. We don't do it on the podcast. Oftentimes we just go and speak to them. I think that's why I was elected as president for the San Diego Association of Realtors, is because I had a political edge. It wasn't because I'm a great realtor or doing all this, but we're focused on that. But I'm going to tell you the truth. Your name is buzzing right now. Like people are talking about you in positive ways. Okay, so whatever you hear negative, you're going to have that 5% creating 95% of the bullshit to tear you down. But the word on the street right now is, and these are from officials and even your competitors that don't want to say it, that you're kind of on fire. So whatever you're doing, I'm telling you,
Don't stop.
don't. And I know you
Keep
won't.
going.
I know you won't. But I'm just saying,
You're
it out
going
loud.
the right
don't
direction.
deviate,
Yeah.
because we need help.
Yes.
The citizens who are fortunate enough to have homes, we care about our community. We don't. This increase of homelessness is coming to every neighborhood. There's no neighborhood. You want to talk about living in La Jolla? Trust me, there's a lot of homeless in La Jolla.
Right.
They're pitching their tents everywhere. And the people in La Jolla are just like everyone else, like, well, it's a human being. I can't, like, we feel bad for it. It's not a problem. They're not like trying to kick them out of La Jolla. But your name is on fire right now. So whatever you're doing, turn it up. Because you got some good backup,
Right.
okay? You got backup, and there's some a Democrat, Republican, I don't care. The average citizen who cares about the city, Vista, everywhere, is looking at guys like you and women like you, and they're going like, okay, there's going to be a fight. There may be even a little war, a skirmish. Speaking on talking, not a real war.
Right.
And I suggest that you keep on, because no one has the answer. But I like your strategic look at it. I think I'd look at tweaking a little bit just because I hear different things.
Yeah.
But exactly what you said is correct. You got to face the fact that these people cannot make a decision. You cannot. They're like children. When you're out of your mind on drug-induced psychosis, you've been on the street for long, and you're asking a person, do you think they're in the same mental capacity to say, "Hey, we got a place for you to stay"? They're going to go, "Screw you." They may think they're on planet Mars right now in the flying saucer.
Right.
You got to take them and bring them and say, "You got a month to get your shit together. If not, we're taking you over there." But at the end of that gig, you have a better chance of living and not running out in the freeway trying to commit suicide.
right.
People have no idea how many violent suicides are going on right now.
Or how many
Huge.
people die in our encampments. And
A die in our campus you don't
about
hear
once
about.
a month, I get an email that somebody's found deceased, they've
Right.
overdosed, or
And
they've died
nobody
of
knows.
exposure.
They're just like, oh, well.
But
what
they're forgotten
Right.
human
They're
lives.
forgotten.
And,
It's so sick.
and that's the human cost that I'm
Correct.
I'm focused on.
What I think though is, I think it's going to take more than a year for these guys.
No doubt.
It's going to take a
Right.
couple of years.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's okay, because I'd rather spend a couple of years,
Right.
put the money in a couple of years to have some guy
Yeah,
functioning.
3 to 5 year
Yes.
plan.
6
just like any
months.
business.
6 months is you just
Can't do
You
anything.
can't. You're just
You're just
touching.
digging
it.
If we're spending
Year.
$80,000 a year per unsheltered person, if we had to help somebody with multiple opportunities over the course, honestly, of their entire life,
Right.
Right.
if that's what's
What's-
required,
We'll
Entire
do it.
life.
I
then,
agree.
then isn't that a better outcome
Absolutely.
yeah.
than them
Better
living
investment.
and dying on our streets?
Yes.
And that's so obvious,
Right.
but again, people don't want to say that.
But you're
There's
saying
some
it.
people that we have to provide homes to, medication to, free, need a place to stay for their entire life.
That's right.
But out of that percentage, how many people are going to be successful? Go back. It's probably going to be in the 90s that go, but there's also going to be like maybe 0 to 8% of the people that we go, we got to keep them here.
When I think
You're welcome
about-
to leave, but we're going to
When
house
I think
you.
about the father that told me with tears in his eyes that he had to bring his son back out and find a place for him to sleep on the streets,
Yeah.
and I asked myself, would his son and would him and his wife be better off as a family with his son in a safe facility where he's got 3 nutritious meals a day, he gets medical care, he gets psychiatric care, he's properly medicated, counseling, he's helped
Clothing, shelter,
clothing,
yeah,
gets
washing.
a bath once a day.
Right.
Would him and his wife be better off and better served by that
course.
reality than by his son living on the streets? And you know what? And I'm not going to shy away from it either. Damn it, our neighborhoods have a right to be safe and clean.
Thank
Our
you.
grocery
Oh.
stores have a right to operate. Our
Yes.
families are we have a right to send our wives to the grocery store and them not feel like they're going to be assaulted.
I just had that conversation
We
with my
have that
wife.
right too.
Right.
But this is the most important thing, and the reason I spent so much time talking about, when people, somebody else said it, when people know how much we care, right? They said they don't know how much you know. They want to know how much you care, and people want to know we care about every human being living on our streets as a human being. We care about every human life. When they see, when people see that we genuinely have a heart for the homeless, then I believe they will allow us. And when they know we want to improve their circumstance, then they will allow us to do
Right.
what is
Give
necessary.
us a chance, right?
And then when you look at a homeless person, I already know the answer. Do you care if they're black or brown or Asian or whatever?
The reality is most of them are white.
Really?
Most of them are young white kids. In
Vista.
In the county.
Really?
Yeah, I mean there are people of all races who are homeless, but there are more young white people than any other age group, and so you understand the narcotic drug problem here. But it's not a problem of any one race, but there, especially when we talk about affordability, the Latino community is much more open to living, with the family, and so that's a bigger conversation,
Right.
But
We'll have you back.
but it surprises people when they learn that it's predominantly now. They're not a majority. They're not more than half, but they're the largest group.
So we can go into that because I know we're on a time frame right now. We have to have you back because what I really want to do.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, the base we're gonna do volumes, okay? Because we love him. The first thing is identifying the problem. The next one is going out to the citizens and seeing what is the crime rate in your neighborhood and why should we suffer because you guys can't fix the homeless. If the homeless were over here and we can't do it, fine. Nothing against homeless. But now they're climbing through our windows. They're going through our garages. They're doing window smashes. and they're not going to jail. They don't go to jail anymore. If you see someone go in your Vons, first of all, they just start taking $900 worth, and you see it all the time. What the hell's going on? I'm scared
That's
to send
going to be
my wife in.
that's going to be a
And that's
whole
another
nother.
conversation.
That's going to be a whole nother one.
That's
We're
a
going
great
to talk
topic.
about crime.
That's a great topic.
Yeah.
So we'll stop it here.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, thank
That'll
you.
be a good one.
Good
Gentlemen,
job, brother.
thank you,
I
Frank.
appreciate it. Yeah,
Thank you,
got
Mark.
it.
John, so much.
Thanks for
Thanks,
doing this.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
Check it out. We're going to follow this guy. He's going to do a lot of good. There's no longer hope. We have to have somebody that puts their foot down and just smashes through the bureaucrats and helps the people on the street because they need help more than ever, and we all see it in every neighborhood. So thanks again.
Thanks, John.
All right.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.